Thank you so much, Dan, for being with us today and talking about the many forms of integration that help to heal trauma. And we need so much in these days. Thank you for your work.
You're welcome, Amelia. An honor to be here with you.
Thank you so much. So let's start talking about the healing of trauma through integration of the 9 domains of integration, and we will stay with some of the main ones to go deeper in it. First, let's go to the concept of integration as a form of healing. Integration inside, in between people, with the world, it's just so much needed. So how do you conceive this concept and explain it for our daily life?
I can just say that the suffering that's happening
is huge.
That's in front of everyone is huge. And we're facing this incredible moment, which I think young people are feeling. 56% of young people in a recent poll said they don't believe in the future of humanity. They don't think there's any hope. Over half. And add that to that, third of young people, especially girls, are feeling like, what's the point of living? When we just think about those incredibly high numbers, this is a moment where the human psyche inside of our bodies and what we share with each other is having a feeling. And, this is an impression just from talking to colleagues, talking to friends, being with patients. The feeling is something very wrong is afoot. Something very big is happening. Something that we used to rely on is collapsing. So
it's time to turn to each other and assist each other to come out of despair in whatever way we can, with whatever gifts we have learned or developed along our lives, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a beautiful person who lives right near where you are, Joanna Macy, who really, she's a dear friend. And, she would always say, you've got to deal with the grief first. Right. You've got to be with your feelings, and in these feelings is solastalgia, this longing for something that we know used to be here, but it's not here anymore. And the other feeling is, to grieve this sense that, we can just have the life that we grew up having, but now our own human obligation is to change things. So you can address the climate disaster this way. You can address, social injustice and racism this way. You can address war and violence the same way. They involve the same thing. And, the reason I wrote that book, Interconnected, was these common ground causes, I think, of all these things we're talking about are about this solo self, this view that my in-group is better than your group, that my human being capacity is better than all of nature. I'll just kill all these species. Who cares? Because they're not humans. However you define this kind of plural solo self, when you start looking at the greater good of the whole, the intraconnected nature of things, then, there's this win-win situation that's there. Number one, you realize, wow, I'm a part of something much greater than this little private individual self, or even how I identify maybe with the in-group. And that in-group becomes wider, and you adjust an identity lens to say, I'm actually all of nature. And that's going to be really good for your individual well-being. But the actions that will come from that, not just the sensation, the perspective, self-experience can be described in 3 ways. There's 3 components: sensation, perspective, and agency. So yes, you're going to feel this broader view. You're going to have perspective that gives you different perspectives, a wider sense of who you are. But your agency, what you act on behalf of, will be better. So it's a win-win situation. I think humanity can do it. But I still have hope. And if we're in a reactive state, we're not going to do it.
Right. And we all need to collaborate to create this, titration or get a critical mass of people working and thinking this way.
Yeah.
We are seeing it. We are seeing millions of people that are now protesting against war, and maybe will help us with the change of mind about how to realize that that way of being as a solo self, nation or person or whatever, it cannot be anymore, that we need to pull together because it's just too much suffering. So can we go to some of the integrations that you are mentioning in your healing trauma course, the course that you are offering now with the integration of 9 domains of integration, and maybe stay with some of the more salient ones, but
yeah, sure. Well, let's list them so it's not a mystery, and you can pick which ones you want to go into. So one is the integration of consciousness. It's a beautiful way of, starting integration, because literally we have a drawing of this wheel, and consciousness has 2 aspects to it that can be differentiated from each other. One is what you're aware of. Like if I say, hello, Amelia, I said it, that's the known, but then you have the knowing that I said this known, right? So it seems subtle, but it's actually huge. Because if you're filled with rage and you want to kill somebody, okay, that's a known, that's how you're feeling. But consciousness allows you to differentiate the knowing from the knowns. So you say, there's a feeling of rage, I feel like killing that person, I choose not to.
Right.
If you're lost in the known and aren't differentiating the knowing, you just go ahead and kill people. Right. So, this is where integration of consciousness is relevant. And there's all sorts of really empowering and enlightening things when you integrate consciousness that we could talk about. And it's essential for working with unresolved trauma.
Right. And maybe briefly in the wheel of awareness, the first we work with more simple knowns, like what you get to know through each one of the senses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's
hearing,
more about
seeing, smelling,
external. And so that's at the edge of the wheel, at the rim. And then slowly we are bringing our attention more and more to the knowing. And
well, you go through the inside of the body, and then you go through mental activities in the 3rd part, and then you go to relationships in a 4th part. But between the 3rd and the 4th part, if you're up for it, you actually bend the spoke around into the hub of knowing. So the hub represents knowing, the rim of the knowns. A singular spoke is a metaphor for attention. So you basically strengthen this, and you're basically building strengthened attention. You're building the ability to have open awareness, right, and you're building kind intention. So these are called 3 pillars of mind training that you're doing when you do the wheel practice. And studies of other practices that do those 3 show that you improve immune function, you reduce the stress hormone cortisol, you improve cardiovascular function, you even change epigenetic regulators to decrease systemic inflammation in the body, which is really important to be able to do. And amazingly, you optimize an enzyme called telomerase, which repairs and maintains the important ends of the chromosome. So you actually slow the aging process. So the wheel of awareness is a cool thing because you're integrating consciousness. It's also cool because as a 3-pillar practice, it is likely that it is also creating these same 5 physiological measures of well-being in your body. So if you talk about how do you build resistance and how you build resilience to all the challenges going on, this would be a good thing to do. A 3-pillar practice, however you might find it. This is just one of the many you can choose from. The 6th thing that the 3-pillar practice has been shown to do is it integrates the brain.
I'm a little bit lost with the 3-pillar practice because we were talking about the 5, and it's very Buddhist, the 5 and the 6 and the but not that your system is Buddhist, but it's similar kind of.
Are you making lists? Well, when you teach a lot, at least when you teach science a lot, it's so helpful to have these lists. So the basic
I know.
Yeah. So the basic issue is, I developed this thing called the wheel of awareness, which integrates consciousness. Then I learned about mindfulness meditation. Right. up there. My first encounters with Jack Cornfield up at near Spirit Rock. And, you know, I had this wheel practice that was just an integration of conscious practice. But he said, you know, that's a mindfulness practice. And then what I was doing was I started a research center at UCLA with Sue Smalley. I co-founded that. And I was at a research meeting. And so I wanted to summarize what mindfulness research is all about. So I had my daughter, who's also a Berkeley graduate, as my son is, yay, go Bears. And she had done this beautiful drawing of like these 3 pillars. And I was gonna, Maddie had made it so it's 3 pillars of mindfulness practice. So I showed it to these group of researchers. Half of them said, that's really a cool drawing. That's exactly what it is. You know, it was focusing attention, opening awareness, building kind intention. The other half said, absolutely not. Mindfulness does not include being kind. No way. And they had this big mindful, you know, disagreement. And I said, so can I call it mindfulness practice? They go, no, you can't. The half the group said, because it's not. You can't include kind intention, you know. So then I said, okay. And I had this drawing that said, you know, 3 pillars of mindfulness practice. I said, what if we take off the full, let's just say, let's call it 3-pillar mind practice. And the whole group of these esteemed researchers said, that's a great name.
I mean,
and they all agreed that those 3 were important. They just wouldn't, half the group wouldn't call them mindfulness. So,
right.
I use that.
That's also a long discussion, because in my practice of meditation and embodying and centering, of course, when you come to this ease, and it naturally arises self-compassion and a compassion to another one. So I guess they didn't want to, perhaps the ones that said not to include not only the awareness, but the actual cultivation of kindness, but it just arises when you are totally present and totally at once, like you are telling us an experience, you know, once with everything. That's love.
I completely agree. And that's why I was kind of shocked at these academics who would not just go with it.
Right.
Kindness is a part of it. So what was interesting about that, and what's actually very useful about the term 3-pillar mind practice, is it's very specific. It's, you want to train attention to be very focused. And there's 5 components of that too, so we won't get into that. But focused attention. You want to have awareness to become open. What does that mean? Where you can sit in the hub of that wheel and just let anything arise without locking onto it. And kind intention is basically, it's compassion, it's care, it's concern, it's a positive attitude, it's a regard, and it's acceptance, all those things.
Oneness.
Yeah, right? What's that?
The oneness, right?
Yeah, oneness, and it comes from the inside out. So it's this inner experience of kindness that then it's just, you realize, and this is where the whole idea of the mind not being just the brain, you know, the mind is as much fully embodied, not just in your head, but it's also fully relational. So when what I love about even the term 3-pillar mind training is that you're able to get into a deep discussion of what is that mind that you're actually training. Well, you're training a process that is regulating energy and information flow inside the whole body and inside the relational world, which includes our connection to people on all of the planet. Right. So anyway, so I actually enjoy the term, even though it came out of a distressed moment when academics could not agree with each other, and it was born out of that. But so the point of that whole thing is just to say the domain of integration of consciousness is useful. Let me go over the other 8 domains, because I think you'll see each has a special role to play as we face the crises we're facing today.